Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Allsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into a special Friday edition of Gamecock Pod Live. I am your host, Keith Allsep. In just a few minutes, we will be joined by my guy, Jordan Kaye from Go Gamecocks and the State to talk all things Gamecock football as we continue to count down the days to kickoff. Today's show is brought to you by Nana's Porch, the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte, Fort Mill, Rock Hill, Lancaster area, your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or the big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue when the weather cools off a little bit this fall. Nana's Porch has got you covered. Even if you want to just have some food dropped off for a watch party, maybe for one of South Carolina's road games. You're not making the trip or you can't make a trip to the home game, but you want to have a bunch of friends over, get in touch with Nana's Porch. And as we all know, make sure you order plenty of the award-winning pimento cheese, voted both number 1 and number 2 in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. Smoky jalapeno, my personal favorite, coming in at number 1, and then the great regular flavor at number 2. So go to nanasporch.com. That's nanasporch.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. I strongly urge you to support this Gamecock-owned and operated business. You'll love it. I guarantee it. All right, and so also jump into the Nana's Porch chat box. Leave your questions, comments for Jordan or myself. We'll be happy to answer those. And so on today's Nana's Porch countdown to kickoff, it is 22 days until kickoff. Number 22, the greatest to probably ever wear the number, Deuce Staley. Staley out of Airport High School, had to go to junior college, came back to South Carolina in 1995 and 96. In 1996, he was first team All SEC. During his time there, he shared the backfield with Troy Hambrick and Stanley Pritchett. As a senior, he rushed for 1,116 yards, which was good for number 13 in the nation. For his career at South Carolina, 345 carries, 1,852 yards. That's 5.4 yards per carry. He also added 59 receptions for 489 yards and 2 touchdowns, and was instrumental in South Carolina's 1996 road win at Death Valley. South Carolina beat Clemson 3 in a row, 92, 94, and 96. And I got a cup full of the Tiger Paw after every one of them, Deuce Staley and Troy Hambrick just running wild in that 1996 game. And then you had Wally Burnham going in the prevent defense, which almost prevented South Carolina from winning. Clemson fans had left. South Carolina was blowing them out. And Clemson behind Neon Green come roaring back, and they cut it to 3 and had a field goal to tie it and missed. And I'll never forget my dad. We were there together. He just laughed, and he just looked at me, and he poked me, and he said, "Son, it's so much better to beat them like this, because for the next year they're going, what if we'd have done this? What if we'd have done that? If we'd have blown them out, they would have just forgot about it." But Deuce Staley, he had a high ankle sprain, and he still broke off a long touchdown run in that game. Of course, he also had a great NFL career. He had 3 separate 1,000-yard seasons for his career. He rushed for 5,785 yards and 24 touchdowns, 287 career receptions for 2,587 yards and 10 touchdowns, and a Super Bowl champion, both as a player and as a coach. And honorable mention goes to Derek Squeaky Watson. In 2000, he was largely responsible for the huge turnaround from 0-11 under Lou Holtz in 1999 to 8 wins and a win over Ohio State in the Outback Bowl. That season, Watson rushed for 1,066 yards, averaged 5.7 yards per carry, and was second team All SEC. All right, let's bring in our friend from Go Gamecocks and the State. Fresh off the football field this morning in Columbia. Jordan, how's it going on a Friday?
Good. How are you, Keith?
It's been a busy week, but great to have you on to wrap up the week. And so I know you were just out at practice, and so I think you guys have had at least 3 shots to be out there, maybe more.
Yeah.
What have your general impressions been from just a little bit of time? You know, kind of like the movie preview. That's what you get. You don't get the whole movie. You just get the preview. Certainly from the photos and from the things that have been written, this looks like a physically bigger, stronger, and more athletic team. What have been your impressions from the limited amount of time you've been able to be out there?
I just think the more you look at the defensive line and the edge guys, the more you're impressed. As much as we want to kind of think about who's going to be at quarterback and who's going to step up at receiver and Rocket Sanders, it just appears to me that the defense, if this team is going to be better, it's going to be because of the edge guys, the Dylan Stewarts, the Kyle Kennards, the Gilbert Edmonds, the defensive line. I mean, all the veterans that are returning, and then you bring in even a dude like Monkel Goodwine from Alabama. They have so much depth. I think Gilbert Edmond said, hey, we're going to probably do like hockey shifts, which, for the non-hockey fans, like they play for like 90 seconds and then come out. So, I mean, you can envision a world where every 2 plays they're getting fresh legs and fresh bodies out there. That's got to make you excited. There's so much more depth and so much more athleticism on the edge and the defensive line than there was last year. It's just going to make the entire defense better. It's going to allow Clayton White to probably call the flex nickel to his liking. And you would think that South Carolina is going to have a much, much improved defense if those guys play up to their potential.
I mean, no doubt about it. Just looking at some of the practice photos from today, that edge group, Kyle Kennard and Gilbert Edmond look considerably bigger than the spring. We've seen the viral photos of Dylan Stewart with the before and after. And so before we fully dive in, you've got a great story up on Go Gamecocks and the state on some of South Carolina's newcomers. It's mostly freshmen, but not all freshmen. But without giving everything away, because we want everybody to go and read that story, just talk about some of the transformations through the strength and conditioning program, but particularly nutrition.
Yeah.
Like, let's just pick out a guy like Josiah Thompson, who had to gain a lot of weight. And then maybe a couple guys like Rocket Sanders and Cam Pringle that needed to lose a good bit of weight.
Yeah, so I mean, Josiah Thompson comes to college as a 5-star, but I mean, he was only 260 pounds. Like, there were edge guys who were, bigger than him, and so his big thing was just he had to gain a ton of weight. And I think there's a tendency with offensive linemen, especially in like high school, it's just, hey, let's drink a glass of milk and eat a peanut butter and jelly every couple hours, and we'll get that weight up. But the nutrition staff at South Carolina was like, no, like, we just want you to gain 1 to 2 pounds a week. Just do that for months. So it's feeding him 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day, 6 to 8 meals a day, almost like 300 grams of protein at times. And he's gained like 35 pounds and might gain a little bit more too, just by the way it's going. I mean, 1 to 2 pounds a week they have 3 more weeks until the season. That's, 3 to 6 pounds. So, I mean, there's a chance he's almost at 300 pounds, which is pretty remarkable, considering that he came in as somewhat of a pretty undersized left tackle. And I mean, you look at him now, he's a pretty lean 290 or whatever he's at. Then there's a guy like, Dylan Stewart, who, I mean, looked the part basically already, but he's a guy who never had to worry about his nutrition. I mean, think about if you're that size, that fast, playing in high school, like, doesn't matter if you're eating Skittles every day or just lean protein, like, you're going to just dominate. So the big thing with him is like education of like, okay, here's why you need to eat right. Here's kind of what you need to eat, and just give him a bunch of options. And, he's not a guy who loves to eat the new stuff or loves to eat vegetables. And so it's trying to personalize the thing and make it, look a little different and look special. And, they're kind of willing to go the extra mile for a lot of these guys to really get them to buy in, which is somewhat interesting because you just think like, oh, the guys will just eat whatever. But it's like, these are 18-year-old kids coming from all over the country. Like, it's not always that easy to be like putting a plate in front of them and say, eat this or eat that. It's like, you got to give them options. You got to give them education. You got to like really explain and show them different things. And it's really coaching like that when it comes down to it. I mean, it's coaching. And even there's a guy like, like Rocket Sanders, even at Arkansas, like it wasn't the same education. So it was basically the people at Arkansas were saying, if you need to gain weight, eat more, lose weight, eat less. And so Rocket Sanders didn't really know too much about nutrition. After a couple months in South Carolina, he's got his body weight or body fat percentage down like 7%. Like, that's a massive transformation. So he's down almost 20 pounds and probably is going to be a lot faster than he was. Then the other example we had in there was Cam Pringle, the freshman offensive tackle from Dorchester. This guy was 18 years old, not even a senior in high school, at 370 pounds. Like, that is insane.
It is insane.
His family owns like a food business, food truck type thing out there. It was a lot of, seafood, fried food, stuff like that. But he would just go out to eat a bunch. And I mean, when you're that size, like, it doesn't, like, you're just going to be way bigger than everyone else you're playing. Like, it doesn't matter if you're, fast or quick. You're so much bigger that who cares how much you weigh? And so he got to South Carolina knowing that he was going to have to lose a lot of weight, and kind of bought into the nutrition, which was for a guy that big, you just have to make sure he's eating like enough protein. So, 300 to 350 grams of protein a day. And then you just kind of cut back everything else. So you cut back the carbs, you cut back the fats, make sure he's just getting the protein, and then the calories can decrease a little bit. He dropped like 40 pounds in 2 months to the point where they're like, hey, you actually need to gain a little bit of weight. Like, you got too skinny. And so he's at around 330 now, 335. But his body fat's down, and he just looks like a different guy and feels faster. So yeah, it's just interesting, like these young 18-year-olds who kind of come in with not exactly the body that is going to make them best on the field. And we always hear about the strength staff and what they do, but people always say, like, if you're dieting, like 70% of it is what you're eating versus what you're doing in the weight room. So it's kind of interesting to see how South Carolina does that with 18-year-olds who are coming from all over the country and need to have different bodies for different positions to do different roles.
Yeah, I mean, good stuff. So before we dive in, so I know you've only been here for a year, but to me, the most compelling player interview of the fall was Mo Kaba.
Yeah, totally agree.
Folks that are watching or listening when we put this up on Apple or Spotify, if you haven't seen that, go to the South Carolina YouTube page and watch the Mo Kaba interview. Okay, this is a guy that I have friends that have known him since he was a freshman in high school. Actually, his first 2 years of high school, he attended Travian Robertson's high school. Then his family moved. He was a high school All-American, a high-profile recruit. He and Boogie Huntley were in the All-America Bowl in San Antonio, but he suffered his first torn ACL when he was a senior in high school. And so he basically 2020 was lost because he was rehabbing all of that year. Then 2021, psychologically and physically, you're just kind of testing it out. But the last half of that 2021 season, he really came on and started rounding into shape. And going into 2022, he was a starter at linebacker. And then the second game of the season, the first half of the Arkansas game, bam, another torn ACL. Then he works his behind off. He comes back. It's still one of the more questionable and mind-boggling decisions of the Shane Beamer era to have a guy that wasn't 100% and a guy that's coming off 2 ACL injuries covering the opening kickoff of the season. And he tears his ACL running down on the kickoff like Lawrence Mitchell did back in the 1990s. And I know you don't know who Lawrence Mitchell is, but he was basically Jadeveon Clowney before Jadeveon Clowney, except he was also the state basketball player of the year as well. And so then he has to go through it again. And most people, 3 ACLs, they would just be like, man, it's just not meant to be. But not Mo Kaba. Talk about the resolve of Mo Kaba and his attitude and really courage to try to continue his college career at South Carolina.
Yeah, I kind of had to get myself caught up on the story a little bit. And when you just hear it, you're just like, why not just like give it up? Why not just say, I'm done with football. I'll become a GA. I'll get my free education, do whatever. And it's like, I don't know if you found this like when listening to it, but it was almost, he was like so scared of the regret that you would have. Like, hey, if I get 5-10 years down the road, I'm going to be like, why the heck did I give that up? And so it almost struck me as someone who was just didn't want to have to deal with the regret. And so he just came back and kind of said like, hey, I never really even thought of quitting. Just, I don't know how. But now it's like, okay, we're back in the same spot we were last year of like, oh, Mo Cobb's back from injury. And it's like you're rooting for the kid. You're like, hey, like hopefully he's going to be able to see the field. Like hopefully some good things happen. And I guess we'll see. Like, I mean, he looks really good. He looks like he's in great shape. Looks like he's fast. And so you're thinking that he's probably going to get on the field somehow, some way. And I think there's going to be a lot of people just kind of holding their breath of like, okay, like let's wait for him to make the one tackle and then get up. And it's like, once that happens, it's good. But I figured he would have some sort of fear of like getting back on the field, getting back on the practice field. You know, there's a scrimmage on Saturday. Like, how do you go through that and not be a little timid, like not be a little scared of like making a tackle and, oh crap, what's my knee gonna do? Unless he's just really good at hiding it, it didn't seem like he was scared at all, which is kind of remarkable. So he'll be very interesting to watch and see like how he gets in the rotation and what he looks like. Because I think a lot of people, it's kind of easy to forget a little bit because it's like we haven't heard his name and since almost a year ago.
And so one of the things that really, so he's a fifth-year player this year, but because of all the injuries, he said, I've still got 3 years of eligibility to prove what I can do, and I'm going to get my spot back. I mean, his resolve, it still matches the character of what was described to me from a kid that was back when he was 16 years old.
Yeah.
He went about his business. He was all about family, football, and academics. And I mean, if there's ever a guy to pull for, to me,
he's the one.
Yeah, he really is. All right, so tomorrow is South Carolina's first scrimmage.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the things going into that scrimmage? Let's start on offense. I've got my list, but give me 2 or 3 things that you think South Carolina needs to accomplish coming out of this first scrimmage offensively.
There's just got to be some level of confidence in one of these receivers, probably 2 or 3 of them. And it's like you hear names. Like I've heard, good things about Vandravius Jacobs. I've heard really good things about Mazio Bennett. Some good things about Dale Von Coleman, the Nevada transfer, who's pretty big. But it's just like, I don't know. It's not like these guys are blowing anyone away or just dominating every single day at practice. So it's hard to really go into the season and be like, this is the Xavier Legette replacement. This is the guy. And I don't know if we have that yet. And so it's going to take a little bit of time. I think that's the one thing of like, all right, it's a game setting. Who's going to step up? Like, who does Lenora Sellers want to hit? That's number one. Number 2, like, I'm really excited about these tight ends. Like, there are 3 tight ends who could, like, start on a lot of teams in college football. Josh Simon, the freshman Michael Smith, and Brady Hunt. Like, I think they all could play. And it's going to be interesting to see if Dow Loggins does some different things of formations that have 2 tight ends in them. Because we might get to, late September, October and be like, are South Carolina's tight ends, better at catching than the wide receivers? And so I think they're going to have a really important role in the pass game. So to see what they do in a scrimmage setting will be interesting. And then I think the third thing, like not a lot of people are talking about, I've heard really good things about Robbie Ashford. Like, I don't think he's going to start by any chance. Maybe. I mean, probably not. But I think he's going to be used in some places here. Maybe 6 to 8 snaps a game where you just get him in and let him run the ball. I think he's good enough to where if you need him to make a throw, he can. But why not put him out there as a running quarterback and let him go. Let him see what he can do, especially when, Lenora Sellers is basically built the exact same way. And if you want to keep some hits off Lenora Sellers, like put Robbie Ashford in there. Like he's just as fast, just as big, not as big, but pretty dang close. And give him a couple reps to go run the ball, or get in there with Rocket Sanders. I mean, if you put Robbie Ashford under center, they're gonna load the box. I mean, it might open up something for South Carolina, because the defense thinks, hey, this guy's coming in, he's gonna run. So I have a feeling he's gonna be used this season, and it'll be interesting to see what that looks like during a scrimmage.
So one of the things that stuck out to me from his media availability was he talked about how his shoulder was injured last year at Auburn.
Yeah.
And, that's why he was only a 50% passer. And so that was like number one for me was backup quarterback. How, can Robbie Ashford be more than just a runner? And if not, what do you do with Luke Doty? Because I'm still not convinced he may not be the second best quarterback on the team, but I know they want to get him on the field.
Yeah.
And so to me, how accurate can Robbie Ashford be? Because like you said, I think when he does come into the game, teams will load the box. Now, maybe with the zone read, RPO, jet sweep action type plays, you got enough eye candy and options for him to still be successful. But I want to see that. I mean, I've heard the same names. I would add one guy to your list would be Tyshawn Russell. I've heard a lot of really good things about him. People forget last year. So his senior year in high school was the first year he had ever played wide receiver. He had been a corner his entire high school career, and then he catches 4 touchdowns in the state championship game to lead his team to the state championship.
Yeah.
But I mean, those are the names I've heard. Vandrevius Jacobs, Russell, Mazio Bennett, Delvon Campbell. You still hear Gage Larbadane. I do think there's a little size concern of him being able to take hits in the SEC. But then for me, what about Nick Harbor, the guy that's the only player in the history of Bruce Feldman's Freaks list to be number one 2 years in a row? But how does that translate over onto the football field on Saturdays? I mean, what are you hearing and what have you seen from Nicholas Harbor? I do think he's leaner and weighs less than last year, which I think will help a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard there's been a couple plays where he gets the ball and turns upfield, and it's like unbelievable to watch. Where it's like, holy crap! Like, I can't believe a human is running that fast in pads. But I think there's a lot of there's still so much that he has to work on. I don't think his route running is up to the level that it needs to be, especially if you get these really good SEC quarterbacks who are probably just going to press him at the line, and all of a sudden the speed, it's really hard to get up to the top gear. I think South Carolina is probably going to try and find ways to move him around, make sure a linebacker's on him. But again, it's like you can try that, but these teams are not stupid. They know who Nick Harbor is. They're going to probably do whatever they can to not have a linebacker on him, either move a safety down or whatever. So it's hard. It's like that's the chess game of this. Then the other thing is I think he has to just get better at catching. There's times where I've heard he just drops too many passes, and so the route running and the catching ability is what he's got to work on. But he just needs reps. That's all it is. I mean, this is a guy you forget. He's 19 years old. He missed all of spring ball because he was doing track. He's a little behind. So it's not surprising that, he comes in and like isn't just blowing people away right away. Like he's still got 3 weeks of fall camp, like to really get himself ready. And I know he's putting in the work. Like I bet he's the guy in the jugs machine every day. I bet he's the guy, staying after practice and running routes and stuff. Like he's going to put in the work and stuff, and he's got a couple weeks to really make the improvement. So, I mean, there's a chance. I think his between where his floor and ceiling is so drastically big, like the gap of what he could be is massive, and that's what excites you and what scares you a little bit. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he has a similar season to last year where it's 12 to 15 catches for 250 yards or whatever, and then I wouldn't be surprised if he has 1,000 yards. It's it's such a big range of what he could be, because he's young and inexperienced, but he's also this freak with insane speed. And it's what does that mesh? How does that mesh? What does that look like? But I mean, you got to remember, he missed all of spring. His ball skills are, he hasn't been working on them for 8 months. When you're not out there every day, trying to catch passes over quarterbacks, that's a hard skill to learn, and it takes time, it takes reps. And so we'll see what that progresses and what he'll look like in late August, early September.
No doubt. So last year, South Carolina's offensive line ravaged with injuries, particularly at offensive tackle, forced a true freshman into action at left tackle, which is less than ideal, in Tree Babalade. But now you have this blend of returning players, younger freshmen and sophomore, very talented players, transfers, and then older guys like Vershawn Lee, and Ja'Kai Moore. You got Kason Henry, who's finally healthy, who won the Most Improved Player of Spring award, I think just because he went through every practice, which was the first.
Yeah.
But I mean, now South Carolina, they have 9 or 10 guys that you would probably feel pretty good about being out there with the starting group. And so to me now it comes down to who are the starters and who's next man up. You know, if the right guard goes out, who's the next man up? Are you moving your backup left guard, or are you moving your starting left guard to right guard and then bringing in your second left guard, because that then puts the best 5 players on the field? But for me, I guess I'm looking for them to start to solidify that starting group, because continuity and playing together and being used to playing next to this with the same guys is very important. And I mean, normally you would hate to say it, for the second year in a row, you may be starting a true freshman at left tackle, but Josiah Thompson at 295 or whatever he is, 6'7", I mean, he's maybe just that 5-star guy that would normally go to Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State or Texas and just walk in and be the most talented player on the field. I mean, we see it more and more these days.
Yeah, and if you're South Carolina, it's I mean, you almost say it as a bad thing, but we're starting another true freshman at left tackle. For them, they're probably not that bad about it. Think about you bring in any offensive lineman through an official visit. All you got to do is point out on the field, say, hey, we're not afraid to start, freshman offensive linemen. We're not afraid to start, these guys. And I'm sure they probably told Josiah Thompson the same thing last year when Tree Babalade was starting at left tackle. Say, you're good enough. We're not scared of putting you out there. So just for the recruiting purposes, I don't think it's that big of a deal. But yeah, no, they do have depth, which everyone's got depth until the season starts. So sounds really good now. And then we might get to October and it's like, this team has no depth. Holy cow. So we'll see. I mean, there are a lot of guys who are competing, especially for like the tackle spots. I think there's 4 dudes who could win the 2 jobs. Ja'Kai Moore, Tree Babalata. I mean, we forget he started like a half dozen games, maybe 9. I can't remember, 6 to 9 games at left tackle last year. Ja'Kai Moore, Josiah Thompson. People have said he's doing really good. And then Kason Henry. That's 4 dudes. At guards, I mean, I think Torricelli Simpkins, I've heard a lot of really good things about I think he's an NC Central transfer. Not exactly like the tallest guy in the world, but you don't need to be a guard. And then you have Vershawn Lee at center. I mean, they do have a nice blend of experience and youth, but there is depth. The one thing, I give Lonnie Teasley a lot of credit because there's some coaches who don't necessarily want to do this. Like, he makes sure that during the spring, all of his offensive linemen, aside from probably the center, are working on both sides of the ball. So if you're a guard, you're playing both left guard and right guard. If you're a tackle, you're playing left tackle, right tackle, just to make sure he doesn't have to, like when he's looking at a depth chart, he can be, okay, who's just my best tackle, and doesn't have to look at who's my right tackle and left tackle. And sometimes it's easy for guys to learn how to cross over, and sometimes it's not, and it takes them weeks. And so at least he has that and knows that, okay, all of my guys can play on either side, and so I don't have to worry about, okay, here's my right tackle depth chart and my left tackle. It's just my tackle depth chart. So that should help him a little bit too. But you're right. I think it's a little bit up in the air right now as to who's going to get the nod, because there's 3 weeks left and a couple scrimmages to go. And I mean, there's 4 guys who could compete for the tackle and a handful more who could be a guard. So, but you're right. They're going to probably have to start narrowing it down soon. So those guys are playing next to each other for at least a couple, you would think a week or 2 before the season opener. So we'll see how quickly they try and iron that out.
No doubt. Tree Babalade, Josiah Thompson, Kamar Bell, Marquis Anderson, Ja'Kai Moore, Torricelli Simpkins, and Trevon Ball. Mm-hmm. And Ja'Kai Moore, he started games at essentially every position except during his career. When you look at his bio,
he started 3 different positions just last year. That's crazy.
Yeah, and he's healthy. Last year, psychologically, he was coming off the death of his mom, had passed away in the spring. A very talented guy that when South Carolina got him, it was a huge win. Clemson, they went up to Virginia recruiting this guy. Penn State, he was the number 1 offensive tackle on their board. And he's battled through injuries, position changes, coaching changes, now the death of his mother. And so that's another guy I'm really pulling for. And so I do agree on the tight ends. And I think, a Joshua Simon could kind of be a security blanket for Lenora Sellers, particularly early in the season until we see how it shakes out at wide receiver. The same for Brady Hunt. And I don't know if you watch Michael Smith's senior film, but that cat
he's
looks
ridiculous.
Like a wide receiver. He runs routes and runs like a wide receiver at 6'6", 250 pounds.
Yeah. I think he's going to be playing this year. I don't know how much because, like you're saying, the tight end room is loaded. But when he got on, it's really hard when you get on campus in the summer to play right away. From everything I heard, Michael Smith was as advertised, and he jumped into the fold right away. And it's going to be pretty hard to keep him off the field.
Jordan, I just think it really speaks to the depth of this freshman class because three of the guys I've heard the most about
are freshmen.
Are the guys that didn't come in until this summer, like Matthew Fuller.
Yeah.
Lewis Solomon, and Smith. Those were the three guys.
Yeah.
All right, so go ahead.
Yeah, like Fuller, I mean, he totally got lost, like, in my mind. Because I'm like, you have the 3 transfer running backs. I'm like, who cares about the freshman? And then he gets to campus, and everyone's like, that dude is built. He does not look like a freshman. Oh, interesting. Okay. Keep that in the back of my head.
Yeah, I mean, I know you probably don't remember Robert Newhouse, but he played for the Dallas Cowboys back in the 1970s. He just had huge quads and thighs, and that's kind of the thing you hear about from Michael Smith, just how big, how physical, that he may already be the best blitz pickup back on campus because of how physical he is, and he's a lot faster than the staff even thought he would be. And
yeah,
I mean, I don't know what his role is, because you do have Rocket Sanders, you do have Oscar Attaway, you do have Jawan Howell, but make no mistake about it. I mean, and DJ Braswell, who, according to Marquell Blackwell, had a heck of a spring.
Yeah.
I mean, South Carolina went from 0 running back depth last year to maybe one of the deepest running back rooms, even in the SEC.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. So moving to defense, to me, the most critical thing I'm looking at is the cornerback position, because we've talked about it ad nauseum. There are plenty of dudes at edge. You just got to sort out your rotation. There are plenty of dudes at defensive tackle. I think DeAndre Jules is going to upset the apple cart and probably end up being in the top 3.
Yeah.
And somebody's going to get bumped out. It's like musical chairs, and music stops and somebody's left out of the chair. I don't know who it's going to be, but it's probably going to be somebody.
Yeah.
And so, can O'Donnell Fortune become a dude, right? Because he's essentially just been a guy. Okay. The staff evidently feels very confident in him. But I mean, if he could be Aaron in the Nana's Porch chat box, DeAndre Jules is the guy from Pitt. That's right. But Fortune, he flashes, he has big moments, and then he has bad moments, like the Florida game last year. 4th and 13 or 15, they throw short of the line to gain, and all he's got to do is make an open field tackle and the game's over.
Yeah.
And he can't make it.
Yeah.
And so can he step up and be a guy like South Carolina's had many guys in the past that could take away one side of the field, because you're going to be young on the other side, whether it's Collier or Swain, who clearly is probably the most gifted athletically gifted corner they have. How do you see it shaking out?
I don't know. That's like the one spot I just don't have a good feel for yet, because we haven't really seen too much live. But I was kind of like you. I'm just like, the first game, I didn't really cover it. If I'm not mistaken, that Florida game was not kind to O'Donnell Fortune. Is that right?
I mean, he did miss the tackle late.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching that and being like, yikes, that is, there were just a lot of plays. So I thought it was really interesting that they came into the spring and being like, O'Donnell Fortune is a starter. I was like, really? Like, no competition there? He's just a starter? I was like, okay. So, I mean, they must feel pretty good about him. But, yeah, it's not like he was better towards the end of the season. So that was a lot of the good stuff. But it's hard to get that Florida game out of your mind. So, yeah, maybe he is that guy. But definitely not like hey, this guy is so good he's going to shut down the field. At least not yet. Maybe they've seen things that we haven't. that they're like, we're really confident in him, but based on last year, it's, I didn't get that impression necessarily. And then, you've got three guys compete for the other side, and I don't really have a great feel for it yet. It's hard too with that position because it's, there's just so many reps and stuff. It can be tough to judge, and we haven't seen too much of that. So, I'm not sure. I think it's pretty open. My guess is that somehow, some way, all four of those guys who were kind of in the mix play every game. So I don't think it's going to be a case where it's like, the quarterback where it's like, one guy's going to play 90% of the snaps. Like, I think all those guys are going to eventually get on the field. So we'll see what it looks like. They all seem to bring a little different. Like you're saying, Swain, probably the most like physically gifted. Judge Collier, definitely a guy with crazy athleticism and can fit in there. And then Embry Floyd, I mean, he's got experience. These guys all have something to bring. They're all going to play. But it's, hey, who do you throw out there week one as a starter? I don't know yet. I wouldn't necessarily be surprised by anything, though.
I agree. To me, that this Saturday, tomorrow, to me, that's like job one on defense is to start to identify, what that's going to look like. And then, who is going to be the other inside linebacker with Debo Williams? Bam Martin Scott's been sidelined with a hamstring injury. He has not practiced yet. To me, that really opens the door for Demetrius Knight or Bengali Kamara, who Clayton White's really been singing the praises of. And then, depending on how the next 3 weeks go, I'm still not counting out Mo Kaba.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's those three are probably the top three right now because a lot of the other guys are playing that Sam linebacker spot. Bam Martin Scott. Who's the other one? Fred J.R. Johnson, the freshman, and then one other guy. I can't remember.
Wendell Gregory?
No. Jaron Willis.
Jaron Willis.
So, it's going to be, Bengali Kamara, Demetrius Knight, Mo Kaba, really vying for that other spot. Probably another one like the cornerback. Wouldn't be too surprised with whoever they throw out there. I think all three of those guys are pretty good options. And probably like the cornerback, I would imagine they'll rotate it a little bit. And I think, Clayton White even brought up the thing of, hey, like, Bam Martin Scott has the ability to play, inside linebacker. Like he's been playing there a little bit during the spring. So there's a chance that they move him inside in certain packages and have him next to Debo. So we'll see what that exactly looks like. But I think it's probably going to shift game to game at times where there might be different guys starting there.
I mean, look, after last season, right, like going into the Florida game, looking at a lot of the snap counts, South Carolina only had like 3 linebackers. Both corners, maybe Judge Collier would get 8 or 10 reps, and Florida's running 100 plays, and you got guys on the field 88 or 90 plays on defense.
Yes.
That should not be the case this year, barring a catastrophe of injuries across the board.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. And so lastly, I mentioned this a few weeks ago. Now, Joe DiCamilla said, hey, there's going to be a field goal kicker competition because this guy, Alex Herrera was injured most of the spring with that heel injury. Any clarification on how that could be shaken out?
None. None. I haven't, I only heard after the first 2 practices, but didn't hear a lot of great things about how the kicking game was going. You have Herrera, who was a walk-on until 8 months ago. injured for most of the spring, and you got a bunch of walk-ons, and like flip a coin. I have no idea who's starting at kicker. I don't think anyone in South Carolina has an idea who's starting at kicker, because really, like, you got to give it some time. And so you've got to see how these guys perform in scrimmages. You've got to like add up 10 to 15 practices to start getting the, you know, the law of large numbers and say, okay, what are percentages looking like after 10 practices, 12 practices, 15 practices to really know. And because Joe DeCamillis wasn't here last year, he has no like bias towards any of these guys. Like, he's not a college guy.
Thing.
It's a great thing. Yeah, he has no bias. He didn't recruit any of these guys. He has no bias. He does not care whether you're on scholarship or not on scholarship. He does not care how long you've been here. He just cares about who's kicking the best and who he trusts the most to make a kick. And, like, I have no idea who that's going to be. Could be anyone. So, yeah, I think that's one of those situations that we might not know until, like, the week leading into the game of who they're going to have as the kicker. And the other thing is, who kicks field goals might be different than who's the kickoff guy. So there are two competitions going on, the kickoff and the field goal kicker. So that's completely up in the air. If you're a South Carolina fan, not exactly where you want to be, of, hey, we have no idea who our kicker is, and we didn't recruit a kicker. We didn't recruit a kicker out of the transfer portal, to really win the job. And so we're left with a lot of just walk-on guys. Maybe one of them ends up being a stud, but you don't know that yet. And so I have no idea who it's going to be. I don't know if you've heard any differently, but to me, that's completely up in the air.
And so that kind of determines what your thought process is when you get into plus territory. Like, okay, it's 4th and 5 from the 37-yard line. All right, that's going to be a 52-yard field goal, 4th and 5. What are the odds?
Yeah.
Are the odds better we make 4th and 5, or are we kicking the field goal, or are we punting? I mean,
yeah.
So you just don't know.
Yeah, it's especially scary. I mean, last year, if Mitch Jeter comes out there, and if it's week 2 against Kentucky and you need a game-winning kick from 40 yards, like, I'm feeling pretty good that Mitch Jeter's going to hit it.
Absolutely.
This year, if South Carolina needs a 40-yard field goal to beat Kentucky, like, you're holding your breath, like, oh boy, like, we'll see how this goes. So yeah, it's not the most comfortable position to be in if you're a South Carolina fan, especially with Shane Beamer and Joe DeCamillis being such special team savants. It's probably not the position they want to be in either.
All right, so Shane Beamer will be available tomorrow after the scrimmage, and so
yeah,
go ahead and cue it up for us. What's your first question for Shane Beamer going to be?
I just like who stood out to him. I always find it interesting, like, who coaches point out after scrimmages. Whoever he name drops is probably going to be a guy that you can almost for sure pencil in to be a starter, if not at least a contributor. So I'd probably just make it as open-ended as possible. Like, what receivers stood out to you today? Whoever the 2 or 3 guys are that he named are probably going to be your 2 or 3 starters.
I don't know. I mean, Kleininger asking that kind of question at the August 1st. He went through every position.
Well, that's before anything was going on, though. Maybe it'll be different. Maybe it won't be. But you gotta at least, that's what you gotta try at least. It's also very hard to ask questions about a scrimmage that you didn't see.
Right. It's true.
This happens all over college football, but it is one of the most bizarre challenges if you're a reporter. You have to ask about something you have no clue what happens. Like, these coaches could say whatever they wanted. Oh, this guy had the greatest scrimmage of all time. And, for that moment, he could be lying or could be not. I don't know. Who knows? So it's a very weird thing.
Well, and plus coaches are like politicians now. They try to say as much as humanly possible without saying really
anything.
Anything. All right. Well, hey, Jordan, I can't thank you enough for being on and being so gracious with your time today. Have a great weekend. It'll probably be hot and humid when you're out there tomorrow, so hydrate.
Sure. Thank you.
And we'll look forward to catching up with you again down the road. Thanks again
Awesome.
so much.
Thanks, Keith. Have a good one.
All right. That was Jordan Kaye from Go Gamecocks and the State. And so a lot of questions about this team, but potentially a lot of answers at wide receiver. Certainly you would like to think the tight ends will be an area of strength and could be kind of that security blanket for Lennar Sellers early in the season. And who does he have the best chemistry with? Is it Mazio Bennett? Is it Vandrevius Jacobs? Is it Tyshawn Russell? Is it somebody we're not even talking about, like Gage Larvadane or Jared Brown even? You know, at one point they had Nicholas Harbor running back kickoffs. I mean, I got to say, if you could ever get that guy about the 25-yard line, he's not going to be caught. I mean, 10-1 in the 100 meters. I mean, we saw the gold medal race. What was the winning time? It was like 9.85. I mean, 0.25 seconds from a guy that is 6'5", 230 plus pounds versus 5'11", 175 pounds. That would be interesting. But I don't know if he'll be the kick returner. I think Juju McDowell and I think some of the newcomers, Bakari Swain, maybe at punt return. Jalen Kilgore did it last year. Jared Brown, who's really fast. It'll be really interesting to see what Joe DeCamillis does with those special teams unit, and in particular with the return game. You know, who is the punt returner? And then with the wide receivers, you know, the top 6 guys in September may not be the top 6 guys in October because of just how talented, you know, DeBron Gatling and Mazio Bennett are. If they're not in the starting lineup in September, by October, they might be. Maybe by then Nicholas Harbor comes on. I mean, you continue to hear great things about Vandrevius Jacobs, about Delvon Campbell, Tyshawn Russell. So it's going to be very interesting for South Carolina. Also, you know, how does that depth shake out? How does the guy, if it's Tree Babalade, if he does not win the left tackle spot, how is his ego willing to accept that? And then where do you put him? Because I still think he may be one of your 5 best players. Do you bump him into guard? Do you put him at right tackle? I mean, these are good things. These are good options. It's not, well, we gotta play Sidney Fugar and Jackson Hughes because we don't have anybody else. Well, now we're a month into the season. We're going to throw out Tree Babalade and Trevon Ball because we don't have anybody. They're true freshmen, and they weren't even here for spring practice like Marquis Anderson was. And then can Marquis Anderson finally get healthy? Because even today, he's out on the side working with the trainers. You know, he had the back spasms in the spring. He missed the spring game. So it should be interesting for sure. And so thanks to everybody for tuning in today at a special time. I know, you know, we got a lot of competition today in this time slot. That's why We'll go back to Wednesday morning next week because of my schedule and having to be out of town for business meeting. Today was the only day could really plan the show. And so if you enjoy listening or watching live on YouTube and would like more of this podcast every single day, I encourage you to join our growing Gamecock family and join us for Gamecock Pod Daily. You'll be able to listen to this show every single day, Monday through Friday, starting on Sunday, September the 1st. We'll have our morning after podcast, which is the most popular podcast during the football season. We'll have the Garnet and Black Town Hall every Tuesday night. It's a live interactive Zoom call where you get to give your grievances, your comments, your questions, concerns. Very active in the chat. Everybody gets to take their turn talking about the Gamecocks. It's like going down to your favorite sports bar and chopping it up and talking Gamecock football. So you'll be able to listen to great guests like Jordan Kaye, Peyton Titus from Go Gamecocks, Hale McGranahan, Alex Jones, and John Whittle from the Big Spur. Good friend of the show, Mike Uva, will still be with us from time to time. It's time to get Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and Brad Crawford, 24/7 Sports, National College Football analyst. And so sign up for a week at no expense. Right now, if you sign up for an annual VIP subscription, you get up to 3 months off of the cost of an annual subscription, or become a VIP monthly member, get a week for free. And it's like the cost of one trip to Starbucks per month. So just follow me on Twitter at Kaye Allsep. Follow the show on Twitter at Gamecock Pod. Go to the top of the homepage, click on the link. Signing up is easy. You'll love it. I guarantee it. If all else fails, just go to Google and type in Gamecock Pod Daily. You'll be able to find us. All right. Craig in the chat box says Vegas insider Brian Edwards picks us to go 4-7. Well, so what happens to the 12th game? Did he pick us to go 4-8 or 5-7? I mean, Craig, to me, I could see this team being anywhere from a 5 to 8 if everything goes right, maybe even a 9-win team. But, you know, things are, to quote Lou Holtz, things are never as good as they seem. Things are never as bad as they seem. The truth is always somewhere in the middle. I think if you're Shane Beamer, you really want to get to at least 7 wins, like not 6-6, okay, but at least 7 wins. You should have 4 guaranteed wins in there. And then you've got some home games and even a couple road games in the SEC that, you know, Clayton White in an interview with Phil Kornblut said he would put up his defensive guys against anybody. So let's see. I mean, good defense, a run game, and kicking game should travel. And, you know, then you got that guy, Rocket Sanders. And Rocket Sanders, Lenore Sellers, the tight ends, that opens up things for the wide receivers because I think Joshua Simon, Brady Hunt, Michael Smith, those guys are going to play. And that could, you know, give a fast guy on the outside an opportunity to to go get a home run ball or to make a play in space, make a guy miss, and take it the distance. So hopefully, looking forward to hearing Shane Beamer and what he says tomorrow after the first scrimmage. I would anticipate a lot of younger players playing that scrimmage. But we'll be back on Monday. Maybe we'll have a Sunday night football show. We'll play some of the audio from Shane Beamer. I'm going to try to touch base over the weekend with some sources about the scrimmage. But one thing's for sure, we'll be back on Monday with Gamecock Pod Daily, and we'll be back next Wednesday morning with Gamecock Pod Live. So again, special thanks to Jordan Kaye. Special thanks to all of you watching live and listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is Keith Allsep signing off. Thanks to Craig, Aaron, and everybody else in the chat box and watching live. Have a great weekend, everybody. God bless and go Gamecocks. I'm out of here.